And basically, once I was done with it in Cinema 4D, I just came to Unity, dragged and dropped it, and everything had the proper collider on it. Let's take a look at some of the other things that we said were hard or not quite possible to do in Unity. Such as, one thing that really bugs me is, let's say, remember how I said we couldn't remove like 5 rigid bodies from 5 different objects at once? We also can't say, set the mass of the rigid body on all these game objects to 2 altogether. So let's find a solution to that. These guys over here all have rigid body. Let's first demonstrate the possibility that we can take the rigid body off of them very quickly. I got this tool here called the Automator. I can say remove rigid body, and the rigid body component on all those objects is now gone. I want to add them back. I could add them through here, but Unity already has the support for it, so I'll just add them from back here. And select them again. Now I want to set all of their masses to 2. Instead of clicking on them one by one, I can select them and say set mass rigid body 2. Now all of them have a mass of 2. So it really speeds up your workflow instead of having to click on each object and doing it every single time. We talked about how to test player prefs you have to modify your own scripts. You could write a tool that does it for you. You could name your pref key here, say level unlocked, and you can get its current value. There is no current value, but I'm going to set it. I'll say it's in type of int, and the current level unlocked is 5. You can get it back as an int. You can set it back to 0 to test your game as if you never played it before. So now you're not going to create any bugs when you're just playing around with player prefs, because you're not changing your own scripts that do other stuff. You're not adding irrelevant code to your own scripts. Let's say you wanted to measure the distance between 2 objects. The way I'm showing it is going to be a really crude way of doing it, but just to show you the possibility of writing your own tools for it. It would be just a lot simpler just to select 2 objects and have it automatically calculated for you. But you could just also say, one position is 0.14, 0.19, 2, and the other one 0, 0, 0. You can tell to calculate the distance, and you can do stuff based on that. Those are the examples I got so far. Has anyone come up with any other things that really grind your gears when you're using Unity?
I think this one would be key. Have you heard of any ways or seen any tools to simulate like a morph target or blend shape?
Simulate morph target or blend shape. I've seen a couple posts on the forums of people creating tools that do it. Here's one caveat, I guess. For things that require really high performance when your game is played, if you make your own tools, they're not going to be as performant as things that the Unity technology guys build into the engine. But still, you can do it. But I haven't seen like a very successful version of morph target being done, because that's something that really has to be done on like the lower level where Unity is handling meshes. It could be, don't know if it could be done through a shader, but it would be something that the Unity guys would have to build for the most part. Any other ideas or questions? Yes.
Is there a way to have it so that when you create a new object of any kind, it automatically selects that in the project hierarchy, and you just type in the name of that object rather than go in and rename it after every time? Second C# script, to create a new C# script, the first thing you've got to do is rename it, and then you've got to name the class of code.
Exactly.
Is that that's something really?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It is really annoying to have to do that. And one thing I hate, oh god, let me show you. Create a new C# script. You go in, Unity bosses you and tells you, oh, you got to use start for initialization. You got to use update for updating. So once you've used Unity for a year, you're sick of seeing that all the time. But a lot of stuff in Unity, stuff like this is really open. So you could just go to your application, and there is the template for it inside of Unity. If you're on a Mac, you have to say show package contents, and you can go in and change whatever template file it uses to generate this and take those off of there. Going back to your question, sorry I kind of took off the trail there. There is a class that does that for you. I'll find it right now. Might be editor window. changes. So you can give the onProject change call, and you can detect which one was just added. You can detect if it was a monoscript type object, and if it is, you can go in, get the file name, and put it in the class name instead. You can do it yourself. It takes a while, especially going through documentation. It takes a while to figure out how exactly you're going to do it and which function calls you're going to need, but it's definitely there and it's definitely doable. One thing I used instead of onProject change, I think onSelection change. Here we go. This will notify you of any changes that happen inside editor when you select a different object. So in the lighting assistant tool that I showed you, it was really important that I kept the selection on my light object throughout the whole time. So when you were dragging it along and placing it somewhere, you didn't want to accidentally select another object. So what you'd have to do is you would lock the selection to that. And how you do that is, let's take a look. Set selection.activeGameObject to whatever reference to an object you have, and even if I were to click something in the scene view, it wouldn't select anything else. It would keep my selection on that object. Yes.
So I'm curious, when you do this kind of digging deep into the APIs of complicated tools like Eclipse, for example, is one that I've experienced with. You always have this problem that you start relying on semi-public, semi-supported APIs that then get. Have you found that there's a clear level of APIs that Unity is going to, not change very often, or do you find that things sort of slide out from under you?
Gotcha. Well, just recently, while I was preparing for this presentation, I started using Unity 3 Beta, and then I was, the stable version is Unity 2.6, and I developed all the tools I showed you, like the lighting assistant and the duplicate tool for Unity 2.6. Then I switched to 3.0. I found only one or two things that were broken, and I wasn't using anything that was hidden from me, but it's only little changes that they make, and if it's actually open and public in the documentation, it's not going to change much. So I didn't feel like things were slipping out from under me, but I would have appreciated a heads up about those things so I could fix my.
So the release notes don't include everything that's public that changed?
They do a very good job of explaining every single thing if you look at the detailed release notes. Let's take a look. But I don't think editor scripting isn't something that's extremely popular or talked about that much. So those things don't get the headlines, unfortunately. Let's take a look at what they show in the release notes. Let's just do it for 2.0. These are all like the headline stuff, really important stuff. It keeps scrolling down and down and down and down. You can see everything that's been fixed or changed. So that'll help you. But really obscure things might not get up there. So what I usually end up doing to see if they actually went ahead and changed the documentation is I do a diff on the new documentation and the old documentation.
That's a good idea. Okay. Yeah, right.
Then I can tell if they actually changed anything and told us about it. And if they haven't, then you just have to go ahead and email them and saying, were you guys being jerks when you changed this and didn't tell us? Yes.
I was going to ask, I use a lot of array lists for things.
You use a lot of what, sorry?
Array lists.
Okay. Right.
Non-exaggerate. For pretty much everything, like, holding game objects, things in the inspector already knows how to display. It's just that it will only display an array by default. Is there any way that I can override its display for a public array list for any class, or do I have to do it sort of class by class, like the way that you put it here there?
Okay.
So, like, if I want to just take a certain type of object, give the inspector a way of displaying it rather than having to say, like, for my character controller and for my this, that.
Right, I see. It's only per object that it does that. What you could do is just have a utility class that you keep around, and you could have the functionality of changing the way it looks there. And when you create a custom editor for this one and custom editor for this one, they could both become the same function from the utility class.
Okay.
And then you could share a functionality like that. Although the custom editor thing we have to add at the top of our editor scripts, if I can find it. That's only at the granularity level of a component, so you can't say, oh, change the way array lists look in my inspector without writing your own look for array lists for a specific component. Yeah. slightly wrap this up, one, if you're curious about editor scripts and if you want to know how to write them, one of the best things to do is examine what other people have written, right? So, it can be tough to figure it out at first. I know, like, I tried doing something, I would give up on it for a month and then come back to it and it would suddenly just, everything would just fall into place. I'm like, aha, that's how I do it. In the Unify Wiki, which is a really great source for different kinds of scripts, if you scroll all the way to the bottom, as I said, editor scripts aren't that popular. There are a bunch of them here. And one I found really useful, and something we actually talked about, is the texture import settings written by Martin Schultz. He gives you a way to change the import settings for many textures at once. So you can turn off or turn on mid-mapping for several textures altogether, change texture compression and so on. For a lot of the things here, if you do use Unity 3, you'll have to make sure they still work in Unity 3. But for the most part, they should. And there is just a lot of really good stuff in here. So I would definitely advise that you check it out. Alright, that's all I got, folks. If you have any other questions, I'll be happy to answer them. But